method of science, the aim of religion. That's the motto or the watchword of a series of books published every 6 months for 5 years in the early 1900s, published by Aleister Crowley. They're just like thick, hardbound magazines, if you will. They had poetry. They even had music and pictures and articles, mostly by Aleister Crowley. But anyway, that's what I've been reading from number 7 in that series recently. And yesterday I started something that I've never shared before, because frankly, once I read it over the first time, I didn't get any kind of big magical charge out of it. I was interested in rituals and Enochian and things like that, and so it sort of passed my attention. But I read the very first part of it yesterday for Saturday morning cartoons, because it deals with Ankh-af-na-khonsu. That guy right there, okay? That's whose stele sort of triggered the whole Thelemic Age of Horus series of events. And Ankh-af-na-khonsu was a historical character. Now, yesterday, I might have misled you on a couple things, being misled myself for a number of years. And the older I get, the more misled I feel I've been. I mentioned that Ankh-af-na-khonsu, or a mummy, at least identified as such, was at currently, or in the last 20 years, at the Chicago Museum. And one of my knowledgeable Facebook friends actually sent me a clip where they now identify it as a name that sounds similar to Ankh-af-na-khonsu, who is currently on display there. And if I'm not mistaken, which I can be, 15 years ago or 20 years ago, when we first read about the mummy being in Chicago, they actually did spell it out in exactly the same way, Ankh-af-na-khonsu, as we know it now. But I guess that's neither here nor there. That's mummy dust under the bridge. Another thing that confused me yesterday in preparing for the cartoon day was that I was reading about the various translations of the hieroglyphs on the stele, and there are several versions that are thoughtfully provided in the holy books of Thelema. There's older. Now, Egyptology is a relatively young science, and hieroglyphs. Anybody who has picked up, the classic Budge translations of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, compared to modern scholarship on the subject of hieroglyphics, knows that it was pretty primitive, state of the art around Crowley's day. As a matter of fact, it is nearly non-existent. But my confusion yesterday was Constance and I always considered where it says in the Book of the Law, by best numb out, my breast I beat, by wise ta nich. I weave my spell. And we had read one of the translations years and years ago, and had settled on the fact that Besnamaut was the father, and Tanich was the priestess mother. And then yesterday, when I was looking at another translation of the hieroglyphs, it appeared to identify it just the other way around. But a more careful reading of that showed that it wasn't the other way around. So this morning I clarified and put Besnamaut, father, wise Tanik, mother. Okay. So that being said, what the hell is this across the Gulf thing here? Because, and I am going to pick up and read a little bit further today for us. But it bills itself as the memory of Ankh-af-na-khonsu. Crowley assumed, at least as late as five years after the reception of the Book of the Law, that he himself was the reincarnation of Ankh-af-na-khonsu. Now, don't get too excited, because he also thought he was the incarnation of Edward Kelly. And there's no way anybody can prove incarnations of anybody. And indeed, Crowley actually said, as a magical exercise and for all magical intents and purposes, you pick your own previous incarnation as you see fit, as you see your spiritual trajectory, your momentum as being carrying forth the work that had been established by somebody that comes to your attention, somebody in the past. So in other words, Timothy Leary once said that he was continuing the work of Aleister Crowley. Well, he wasn't saying he's the incarnation of Aleister Crowley, but you see what I mean. But this idea that he was indeed the reincarnation of Ankh-af-na-khonsu, and Crowley had accepted the fact that he was the prophet of the new Aeon, the Aeon that moved from the Aeon of Osiris to the Aeon of Horus, that he, at least in his own mind, projected that Ankh-af-na-khonsu was played the same role, played the same office as the prophet that moved from the Aeon of Isis to the Aeon of Osiris. So he really said this stele here and that guy goes through lives, popping in just at the right moment to announce and to tinker with and to squirt WD-40 into the machinery of the change of an Aeon. And so we can say, sure, yeah, he's Ankh-af-na-khonsu, without getting into, well, can we make a machine to tinker if he has memories and stuff? Well, across the Gulf is a literary fantasy, if you will, this is my point of view, of his life as Ankh-af-na-khonsu. I can see him looking at his reproduction of the stele, because he didn't have the original, okay? and looking at Ankh-af-na-khonsu there and say, I wonder what was the circumstances of his birth, and what was the circumstances of his work, and how he grew and developed and evolved to get to that place. And in Crowley's rich, fertile, wild and crazy, surreal imagination, he made up a series of events in the life of Ankh-af-n-Khonsu and wrote them in Across the Gulf. Now, yesterday I read just a little tiny little section of the very beginning that ended up with, and if you missed it, why don't you catch it yesterday? That's the one where I open with, "Behold his mighty hand." He says, he got to the point of where he said, so then I was to be brought up, befitted one in my station, half prince, half priest. I was to follow my father, hold his wand and ankh, and assume his throne. And now I begin to recall some details of my preparation for that high and holy task. Okay, that's where we left off yesterday. And it sort of gets our hopes up about, something other than what we're whatever our hopes are, it's probably not exactly what we're going to get, no matter what your hopes were. But I was trying to think what it is like. What kind of thing is it? Is it a novel? Is it okay? There's a book called The Golden Ass. Okay, it's a classic. It's a real classic. The Golden Ass being the metamorphosis of Lucius Apului. How do I pronounce that, dear? Apuleius. Okay. And it's by Apuleius. And all you Latin people can laugh your ass off. But the Golden Ass is like a outrageous, over-the-top story of a slave guy that gets involved with a sorceress who, and it's really bawdy. Okay, there's lots of sex and romping, and it's really ribald. Okay, and it's like a dirty novel, and that's actually what made it famous. That's what made it a bestseller in the day, because it was a dirty little thing full of well, the sorceress turns him into a donkey. Okay, and then he has this that's the metamorphosis. The donkey has all these adventures trying to get himself turned back, and there's scenes of bestiality and everything else. So right in the middle of all of this page turning almost pornography, the donkey gets in line to be initiated with others in what is clearly the rites of Eleusis. And actually, he describes, in this pornographic romp, okay, he describes probably the clearest exposition of the various steps, the various sequence of events of the rites of Eleusis. It's wonderful stuff. It's wonderful stuff containing great, great wisdom. The golden ass. You'll enjoy your golden ass. Okay. So when I was reading this, I was thinking, this is sort of this outrageousness, this violence and this weird sex and stuff is sort of like the golden ass. Because while he's doing this, while he's telling this tale of the birth and the history of the life of Ankh-af-na-khonsu, he's also slipping some excellent shit into the narrative. If you can hang on long enough to dig it out, or if you have eyes to see, in other words. Okay. So I'm just going to take us a little deeper into it to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, and but not very far, because I don't want to burden you with this stuff. This may be all you get. But anyway, the book is Across the Gulf. I'm sure you can just download it onto off the internet someplace, because not many people have the full set of the Equinox. So, but if this appeals to you, you might want to do it, because the whole thing is just like this, just like this, only with all those tidbits. Okay. Memory is strangely fragmentary and strangely vivid. I remember how, when I had completed my 4th month, the priests, when he was 4 months old, the priests took me and wrapped me in a panther's skin, whose flaming gold and jet black spots were like the sun. They carried me to the river bank, where the holy crocodiles were basking, and there they laid me. But when they left me, they refrained from the usual enchantment against the evil spirit of the crocodile. And so for 3 days I lay without protection. Only at certain hours did my mother descend to feed me, and she too was silent, being dressed as a priestess only, without the sacred badges of her office. Also in the 6th month they exposed me to the sun in the desert, where there was no shade or clothing. And in the 7th month they laid me in a bed with a sorceress that fed me on the blood of young children. And having been in prison for a long time, was bitterly an-hungered. And in the 8th month they gave me the aspic of Nile, and the royal Uraeus serpent, and the deadly snake of the south country for playmates. But I passed scatheless through all these trials. And in the 9th month I was weaned, and my mother bade me farewell, for never again might she look upon my face, save in the secret rites of the gods, when we should meet otherwise than as babe and mother, in the garment of that second birth, of which we of Chemi know. He's leaving that to tantalize us there. In the next 6 years of my life, the next 6 years of my life have utterly faded. All that I can recall is the vision of the greatness of our city of Thebes, and the severity of my life, for I lived on the back of a horse, even eating and drinking as I rode, for so it becometh a prince. Also I was trained to lay about me with a sword, and in the use of the bow and the spear, For it was said that Horus, or Mentu, as we called him in Thebai, was my father and my God. I shall speak later of that strange story of my begetting. At the end of 7 years, however, so great and strong had I waxen that my father took me to the old astrologer that dwelt in the well to consult him. We met him yesterday. The priest of Nuit, who lived at the bottom of a deep well, so deep that he could see the stars even in the daylight. This I remember as if it were but yesterday. The journey down the great river with its slow days, the creaking benches and the sweat of the slaves are still in my ears and my nostrils. Then swift movements of flying foam in some rapid or cataract. The great temples that we passed, the solitary ibis of Thoth that meditated on the shore, the crimson flight of birds, but nothing that we saw upon the journey was like unto the end thereof. For in a desolate place was the well, but with but a small temple beside it where the servants, they too most holy, the servants of that holy ancient man might dwell. And my father brought me to the mouth of the well, and thrice called upon the name of Nuit. Then came a voice, climbing and coiling up the walls like a serpent. Let this child become priestess of the Veiled One. Now my father was wise enough to know that the old man never made a mistake, but that it was only a question of right interpretation of the oracle. Yet he was sorely puzzled and distressed, for that I was a boy child. So at the risk of his life, for the old man was brusque, he called again and said, Behold, my son. But as he spoke, a shaft of sunlight smote him on the nape of the neck as he bent over the well, and his face blackened, and his blood gushed forth from his mouth. And the old man lapped up the blood of my father with his tongue, and cried gleefully to his servants to carry me to a house of the Veiled One, there to be trained in my new life. So there came forth from the little house an eunuch, and a young woman exceedingly fair, and the eunuch saddled 2 horses, and we rode into the desert alone. Now, though I could ride like a man, they suffered me not, but the young priestess bore me in her arms. And though I ate meat like a warrior, they suffered me not, but the young priestess fed me at her breast. And they took from me the armor of gilded bronze that my father had made for me, scales like a crocodile's sewn upon crocodile's skin, that cunning men had cured with salt and spices, but they wrapped me in soft green silk. So strangely, we came to a little house in the desert, and that which befell me there is not given of me of the gods at this time to tell. But I will sleep, and in the morning by their favor the memory thereof shall arise in me, even in me across these thousands of years of the whirling of the earth in her course. And that's the end of chapter 1 of Across the Gulf. Now, if you want me to continue on, I will, or I can continue on at another time, starting tomorrow, because this might not be for everybody. But even if we don't continue with it, if it's spurred your imagination, get yourself a copy. And when it starts to get absurdly weird, keep in mind the golden ass and how sometimes literature like this contains golden apples. Anyway, until tomorrow, enjoy your Sunday. Sunday school's dismissed. Until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under